Good afternoon. Thank you for everybody to stay here again after an incredible, amazing lunch. Feijoada. It's very nice, very nice. And now we will have the second part of our meeting. In the afternoon, we will start with discussion about the diversity of study designs and innovative strategy for follow-up. I am Fabiola. I am moderator of this table. And we have two talks here. The first, I will introduce both. I think it's better. And they will talk. And after we open for questions and comments. The first talk will be with Professor Arié Stein of the Emory University. Professor Stein is professor in the Hilbert Department of Global Health of the Rollins School of Public Health, Emory University, with a joint appointment in the Department of Epidemiology. In his research, he studies critical periods of susceptibility, gestation, childhood, adulthood, to nutritional deficits in relation to development of adult health and human capital. And after Professor Arié, we will have Professor Barbara Lourenço. She's associate professor of the Department of Nutrition of here, Faculdade de Saúde Pública da USP, and is involved in the MENA cohort studies. So it's my pleasure to stay here to coordinate this table. Professor Arié, the talk with you.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's my job to keep you awake. So we'll see how well I do. So I'm going to start by pretending that I'm a geographer. And this is a map of the world. It's not the map that most of us in the United States, at least, recognize, because this is an equal area map, not a Mercator projection. And it gives us a couple of interesting insights. First of all, you realize exactly how big Brazil really is. Second, you realize how big Africa is. But I'm not a geographer. I'm an epidemiologist, and epidemiology is part of demography or vice versa. I never remember. But this is the world by population. So if the map looks funny, that's because some countries are more densely populated than others. Most of the world's population is in India or in China. So those countries look big. But I'm a child epidemiologist. So what I really care about is children. And this is a map of underweight children, right? If we want to study underweight children, we should probably go to where the underweight children are. This is a map of birth cohort studies papers published in 2008. There's a bit of a mismatch here between where the problem is and where the research is being done. And we've had some presentations this morning from our students who started to address that problem. But I remind you that ECHO, which is an American study, has published 2,000 papers. You've got a lot of work to do to catch up. So part of what we have been working on in cohorts is to try and address this problem. What cohorts is, and it's a consortium that was started in 2005 by some very senior people. I was not involved in it at that point. It's to be involved in the collaboration, it had to be a birth cohort in a low or middle income country. And back in 2005, the cohort itself had to at least reach adolescence. The organizers of that particular consortium, Linda Adair here is in the room. She was involved in it. She'll be talking tomorrow about some of the insights from her perspective. Involved collaborations in 5 countries. In Pelotas, in the south of Brazil. In Guatemala, which is the cohort that I work most closely with. A cohort in India, in Delhi. A cohort in the Philippines, which Linda works closely with. And a cohort that used to be called Birth to 10, and then the children got older, and then it got called Birth to 20, and then Birth to 30, and now they call it Birth to 40, in Johannesburg, South Africa. You can see from this table that we have 6 cohorts, 2 from Pelotas, right? 2 of the cohorts are births in the 1970s. 2 of the cohorts are births in the 1980s. And 2 of the cohorts are births in the early 1990s. The cohorts come from 3 continents, right? They come from a diversity of social backgrounds. We talked this morning about race, ethnicity. They come from a range of ethnic backgrounds. We think of this as a feature, not a bug. And I'll come back to that. But what I want to talk to you today is some of the challenges of harmonizing this particular set of cats. And there are 2 areas that I want to talk about. One is the people involved, and the other is the data. Or I'm English, so it's are the data. Data is a plural noun. Okay, so let's start with the people. You have investigators. Investigators have egos. If they didn't have egos, nothing would get done, right? And they have questions about data ownership. This is my cohort, right? Anybody heard of that? Okay. There's another group of people who are critically involved in any data harmonization and collection work, and that is the trainees, you all, right? You need publications. You need to build a career. You need to get professional recognition. These things can be in tension, okay? How have we at Cohorts dealt with that? So we encourage publication. We have explicit guidance based on the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, the ICMJE, which says that authorship needs to be given to everybody who has earned it, and that you earn it, right? So it's explicit. We have policies. They are written. We have, as Matt described for ECHO, for requesting ability to do studies, we have a process for planning, proposing manuscripts. If a study wants to be done, there's a group of principal investigators who evaluates it. If there are more than 2 of the cohorts that can provide data for it, it becomes a cohort's publication. If not, it is a publication of the individual cohort or 2 cohorts, and cohorts doesn't bother with that because every cohort is independent. In that manuscript proposal, there's a group who takes leadership of the paper, and they become the co-first author writing group. Everybody else, the senior investigators of the cohorts are, of course, because of their senior role in the study, co-authors. And there's a wider group, the cohorts group, which is very broad in terms of its names. Turning to data. We spent this morning talking about some of the issues of harmonizing data from within one country, or in fact, harmonizing data from within part of one city, right? We have here studies that were launched in different decades, launched in different languages, and were launched independently, okay? So one of the issues we have is the age at assessment and the age at cohort inception differs. We have to consider that carefully. What does it mean when we have an association in the Guatemalan cohort when the cohort is 40 and the South African cohort when they are 15? How do we interpret that? How do we interpret weight gain in adulthood in a cohort where the women have had 3 children by the time they're measured, and a cohort where they haven't yet had any, or at most have had 1? The interpretation needs to take these things into account. A second issue is the timing of assessments in childhood. How can we harmonize the exposures that we care about? Right? Again, each of these studies was set up for a different reason. The Guatemala study was a nutrition intervention trial. The Cebu study in the Philippines was an intensive study of child growth and nutrition, and so on. Everyone was established for different reasons. So we took a close look at that. And this is a chart of the data collection periods in the first 20 years of life. Up top, you see the birth to 20, as it was then, cohort in green, the Cebu in red, Delhi in yellow, the Guatemala in blue, and the Brazilian cohort here in yellow, okay? Different periodicities, different frequencies, very little common elements. And what we need to do for data harmonization is identify common elements. And it turns out that what we can identify in terms of child growth measures are 4 data points. One is at birth, obviously. These are all birth cohorts, and every cohort measured the children at birth, although not all of them measured length, and we can come back to that maybe tomorrow. All of them measured at length at age 12 months, except that one of them only measured that in a subsample. Everybody measured length or height, right? Because at 24 months, if you've not yet had your second birthday, you measure length, and if you've had your second birthday, you measure height. Right? So kind of knowing exactly where you are in that 24 months makes a difference, right? There's a measure of length there, and there's a measure in what we call mid-childhood. Now, mid-childhood is age 4 for 4 of the cohorts, and age 7.5 for the 5th cohort, because they didn't have an age 4 measure, and we wanted something in mid-childhood. So again, if you're thinking about interpreting measures over childhood, remember that our mid-childhood measure is at different ages in the different cohorts. And then, of course, as we talked about this morning, we have inconsistent variable definitions. Okay, it would be nice if we all measured the same thing the same way at the same ages and coded the variables the same way. We don't. Okay, so what have we had to do? As we talked about this morning, both kind of Matt and Lucilla talked about scouring the databases to find variables that look the same. So we all have a measure of blood pressure in adulthood, for example. But we have 5 different ways of measuring blood pressure. So is that still blood pressure? Yes, it's blood pressure. Blood pressure is blood pressure, right? We have measures of fasting glucose, or sometimes fasting glucose, or at least blood glucose in every cohort. But sometimes it's fasting, one cohort it's not. Sometimes it's capillary, sometimes it's venous. Right? So we have to make sure that we can use these variables. And how do we use these variables? We develop often site-specific definitions of the construct that we care about. Right? So for example, an environmental construct of household sanitation. Household sanitation means something very different to a household in Pelotas than it does to a household in Guatemala. In Pelotas, just about everybody has running water, everybody has an indoor toilet. In Guatemala, those are rarities, especially back in the 1970s. Nobody had running water. How do you define household sanitation? Well, how close were they to the communal source of the water, for example? So you have local constructs, local definitions of what is the underlying construct of sanitation. You have local variation in what is the local construct of housing quality. Right? But these probably mean just about the same thing. You'd expect a better housing quality to be associated with better health outcomes. You'd expect better sanitation to be associated with better health outcomes, no matter where you are on the spectrum. And you recognize the differences and you come back and discuss the differences. And sometimes the differences make a difference and sometimes the differences don't make a difference. And when they don't make a difference, then we have 6 cohorts in 5 countries, in 3 continents, all showing the same association. That's pretty generalizable. That's pretty powerful. I'm going to give you 2 examples of that as we go through this talk. Here's one of them. Okay, so in 2018, we got money from the Gates Foundation to actually, for the first time in this collaboration, to collect the same data at the same calendar time in 3 of the cohorts. In South Africa, in the Philippines, and in Guatemala. In South Africa, the cohort was 25 at the time, or 28. In the Philippines, the cohort was about 32. And in Guatemala, the cohort was about 40 years old. In Guatemala, the median schooling is 4 years of school in this cohort. There wasn't a whole lot of schooling back in kind of the 1970s and early 1980s in Guatemala, rural Guatemala. In the Philippines, just about everybody finished high school. In South Africa, just about everybody finished high school. And in Brazil, I didn't talk about Brazil earlier. We didn't collect the same data in Brazil. Why? Because the Pelotas cohort had just finished data collection and they didn't want to go back in the field. Right? So we used the data that they collected in that data collection. So what we have here is the correlation between a measure of child development developed from the measures that site gave us to measure child development. In Guatemala, that was a whole series of cognitive studies because that was the point of the Guatemala study. In others, it was a standardized child development measure, but they're different. And the outcome measure here that we're talking about in Brazil differed from the other 3 cohorts. But as you can see, you get the same answer. Child development, right, measured on the x-axis here, is associated quite strongly with adult IQ. Right, and these are measured 20 years apart, 30 years apart, 40 years apart. It doesn't seem to matter, right? So children who do better cognitively in childhood are smarter as adults. Is that causal? I don't know. I'm not saying anything about causality. This is an association. Make of it what you will. Okay. We have the advantage in cohorts of correlated, repeated measures, and we often want to look at the measure, and we want to look at changes over time in the measure and perhaps variation in change over time in the measure. Linda is going to talk about that tomorrow with respect to growth measures, which were the primary exposure that we started off looking at in cohorts. We've done some analyses looking at trajectories of socioeconomic status as well, that use a common set of assets over time to look at where people rank on those assets. Now, does that make sense? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. How many people had cell phones in 1970? How many people have cell phones now? Right? What does having a phone mean? A landline in the 1980s. It means you're quite well off because not everybody has one. What does having a landline mean now? It means you're way behind the times, right? So the same variable means a different thing, okay? What does having a bicycle mean now? Either you're really wealthy, it's an expensive bike, and you only use it on the weekend, or you can't afford a car. Which is it? I don't know, right? These things are hard to interpret. Pulling them all together creates an index that seems to make sense if you look at it carefully. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one more chart. I'm sorry about the formatting on this. We've been having problems with font changes. Okay, I just want to prove to you how all of this fits together. Okay, on the x-axis, so each of these bars is one of our 4 cohorts stratified by sex. Okay, Brazil males, Brazil females, Guatemala females, and so forth. Okay, the y-axis is our IQ measure, standardized within site and sex so that you can't start looking and say, okay, well, the Guatemalans only scored 15 and the Brazilians scored 75, therefore the Brazilians are smarter. These are different tests. So we wanted to adjust for that. The x-axis is stratified, okay? The first row is the child development quotient, this measure of child cognition. The first 2 columns are children who scored least well on it. So they had a less than -1 z-scores of our internal site-specific distribution. So every site has a mean of 0. Okay, the bars in the middle are 1 below to 1 above standard deviation. And the bars on the right are the kids who scored well in the development quotient scores, right? So they had a z-score of greater than +1. What are my takeaways here? First of all, kids, as we've seen previously, kids who scored well on the cognitive measures in childhood have a higher IQ as adults. Okay, you can look at the 2 extremes here. Okay, the one on the left is the kids who scored least well on the child development score and didn't complete whatever the median schooling is in that sample. So in Guatemala, this is primary school. In all the others, it is secondary school, right? Again, context matters, but the overall trend is consistent. The one on the right is kids who did well in childhood and who completed above median schooling. Okay? There's about 1.5 standard deviations of adult IQ there between those two groups. 1.5 standard deviations of adult IQ is a lot of IQ, right? We'd all like that for our kids. Okay, let me take the middle group here. Okay, these two differ only on the amount of schooling that the kids got. On the left, it's the kids who got below median, and on the right, it's the kids who got above median. Does this mean that school makes you smart? Probably not. What it probably means is kids who are smarter stay in school longer, right? And because kids who are smarter have higher IQs in adulthood, it manifests as a higher IQ. Maybe. I don't know. I also know nothing about education here because I don't know what was being taught in the schools. All I know is the number of years of school that people completed. Okay? But this seems to make about 1/2 to 3/4 of a standard deviation difference. Let's look at these two. These bars are roughly the same. Agreed? Okay. One is smart kids who didn't go on to finish high school in most people's cases. And the other is not so smart kids who did finish high school or went on past high school. They end up with the same place. Okay, so the point that I want to take away from this is these are cohorts in different ages, different continents, different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? Context differs completely. You get the same association regardless of which cohort you're looking at. Seems a pretty strong assumption that something here is real and not just a statistical artifact. Okay, I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of extra slides and thoughts here. So first of all, to acknowledge major funding over time. Cohorts has been around now for 20 years. The individual cohorts have received funding from various organizations. The collaboration has received funding from the Wellcome Trust and from more recently from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There are thousands of people who can't be named here because I'll forget some, who've supported the work over the years, the staff, the participants, the investigators, students, et cetera, the funders of the individual cohorts. This is a partial list of the investigators of the various cohorts. I've probably forgotten some. I'm sure the people here will remind me of who I've forgotten. So what has Cohorts done over these 20 years? So it's a global South-oriented collaboration. I'm not a global Southerner, right? I'm speaking on behalf of groups who are, right? It's been around since 2005. We've published well over 30 papers by now, and there are several more in the pipeline. And they've been in high-impact journals. I'll give you some citations in the next slide. They've helped shape the first 1,000-day agenda because of our focus on birth through age 2. I would like to say, and I'm preaching to the choir here, which is that longitudinal, collaborative, multi-country research answers life course questions that can really be addressed in no other way. Intervention studies are always short-term. They go on through pregnancy, maybe if you're lucky, right? Or a 3-month feeding trial. Nobody here's thinking about a life course feeding trial, right? We couldn't do it. And I don't know how you randomize to different nutritional statuses without feeding people differently, right? So there are things you cannot do experimentally. Surveys are just a snapshot, right? They don't allow for analysis of change. And in our case, similarities across contexts enhance the generalizability and create the robustness that we want. Okay, here's a few references starting with Linda's really important paper in the Lancet from 2013. That wasn't our first paper. The first paper was another Lancet paper, but Linda will talk a little more about hopefully about the methods that led to this one. We can make this slide available if you want to look up the references. And a couple of final thoughts with regards to harmonization. Okay. Collaborative research takes work, engagement, and a willingness to share. You cannot do it without sharing data. Okay. It's highly rewarding. It's productive professionally. I've had a lot of fun doing it. Right. You get to go to interesting places. This is Oxford. where we had a data coordinating center for our Gates Award. And one final quote that I'll leave you with, right? Which is, it is amazing how much one can get done if one is happy for others to receive the credit, right? So that's to all of us who are at this end of the life course, right? It's time to be generous. Thank you.
Barbara, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's quite a joy to follow this talk by Professor Stein, and particularly about the Cohorts Consortium, because I've learned so much from this consortium. So being here talking a little bit about another bird cohort, it's very special. So I'm here to talk about the Mina Brazil bird cohort study, and particularly about the follow-up strategies that we have been developing over a decade now, since the cohort was established in the Brazilian Amazon. So just the agenda of this presentation, I will cover a little bit on the study design, area and objectives, the follow-up assessments from 2015 to 2025, the key measurements that we have in this cohort, and then the strategies for follow-up and participant retention. In this first slide, I think it's very important to acknowledge the grants that we have received from the São Paulo Research Foundation. The first one, the conception of this bird cohort by Professor Marli Cardoso, who is coordinating this event here for all of us. And we also had like support from the CNPq and also the Maria Cecilia Souto Fidigal Foundation. And now I am currently a co-PI in this bird cohort study, particularly in the school-based assessment that we have just finished. Like the field work has just happened in last June. So we have no conflicts of interest, and no of the funders had like roles in study design, data collection, interpretation, or whatsoever. So a little background on the Mina Brazil cohort study. We have here in Brazil a challenging scenario for maternal and child health and nutrition regarding preterm births, also the quality and coverage of primary healthcare services, where most of the antenatal care is offered to the Brazilian population, and child malnutrition rates have really important regional disparities here in the country. So just to show a little bit, the DHS in Brazil 2006 and ENANI, the National Child and Nutrition Survey in 2019, show like some differences for stunting and excessive weight according to the Brazilian microregions. And I would like to pinpoint specifically the singularities from Brazilian Amazon regarding the burden that we have there for malaria infection. So we have to the right there an annual index for malaria infection, and you guys can see that all the burden of malaria is there in the north region of Brazil. In Cruzeiro do Sul, which is the city we are developing the Mina Brazil cohort, we are here in one of the highest rates of malaria infection in both of these years. And with this, the unique health risks that malaria presents to maternal and child health since pregnancy, we also have highly vulnerable women in the Amazon with highest odds of preterm birth in Brazil, and poor antenatal care, with almost half of them with up to 3 visits during the whole period of pregnancy. The Mina Brazil study, so it's developed in Cruzeiro do Sul. The design is a prospective population-based birth cohort study in the state of Acre. The population of our city is not too big, but it's 82,000 inhabitants with Human Development Index of 0.66. We had a primary focus in the first 1,000 days, very inspired by the findings of consortia such as the Cohort Consortium. And the overarching aim is to examine early environmental and maternal exposures affecting child growth and development trajectories with epidemiological, clinical, and biological data in this malaria endemic area. So we had different recruitment phases in the Mina Brazil study, starting in pregnancy, where we screened in partnership with 13 urban health clinics, health units in the city of Cruzeiro do Sul, women who were up to 20 weeks of gestational age. And they had the intention to give birth at the only maternity hospital in the city, which is also a reference for the whole valley of Juruá, which is the region where Cruzeiro do Sul is. So at delivery, we performed daily visits at this only maternity hospital. There were 1,753 live births, of which 1,246 mother-child pairs were considered eligible for follow-up after delivery, because they were residents of Cruzeiro do Sul, and they were also residents in the urban area of the city. Of these, almost 44% of them had antenatal evaluations with our project. The exclusions of participants who were living in the rural areas were because of logistical questions that would prevent us to have a good coverage of them in the following evaluations. So here, just to give an overview of the follow-up assessment timeline from 2015 to 2025, we did 2 clinical evaluations during pregnancy, collecting household, social-demographic, obstetric, lifestyles, and clinical characteristics of pregnant women, and also looking at fetal development and confirmation of the gestational age. At the delivery, all the antenatal care, obstetric history, and delivery conditions were assessed, birth outcomes, newborn size, and we also had collection of blood samples. During the puerperium, like, we did phone interviews to understand how infant feeding practices were going, morbidity status, and also social support and maternal depression were assessed. At 6 months postnatal, this was the first in-person evaluation of our participants, looking at infant growth and also feeding practices, the health status, maternal depression again. And then at 1 and 2 years of age, we were performing a more comprehensive evaluation, looking at child growth and the early neuropsychomotor development, infant feeding practices. And here we also had collection of blood and stool samples. When children were 5 years old, we were in the middle of pandemic and COVID-19 pandemic, and we could assemble like a follow-up assessment in Cruzeiro do Sul with SARS-CoV-2 antibody testing, and also doing dietary intake evaluation and screening of behavioral problems. And now, more recently, when children were like 9 years old, we planned school-based assessments to understand in a longer term, like this developmental trajectories. And we were able to evaluate body composition, blood pressure, sexual maturation, lifestyle factors, and also social interactions of children, particularly in school. So this is the overall study measurements. I would just like to highlight that all the assessments used structured questionnaires, and we also had access to medical records at birth. During the antenatal care evaluations, we performed obstetric ultrasound examinations for confirming gestational age and also collecting fetal biometric parameters, already assessing a dimension of child growth and fetal development. The anthropometric evaluations were important to establish like how maternal gestational weight gain was observed in this study population. And for children, weight, length or height, head and waist circumferences were evaluated as well. Blood samples were very important for us in terms of anemia, hemoglobin, ferritin, vitamins, and also inflammatory biomarkers. And more recently, to assess lipid profile and the glucose status. Oh, I just skip this one, but for the developmental screening, we use Denver 2 tests. With the stool samples, we performed some the gut microbiota analysis at 1 and 2 years of age. And behavior problems were monitored through strengths and difficulties questionnaires. In this school-based assessment, more recently, we were, besides the lifestyle factors, body composition and tenor states, we were assessing also the sleep patterns, screen use, if it's in a problematic pattern also, and bullying and at school with peer aggression and victimization scales as well. Regarding our follow-up strategies, it's important to say that from baseline to age 5, the Mina Brazil study had strong partnerships with the local health sector. Municipal and also state departments of health were important partners for us for the screening of the pregnant women during antenatal care by primary health care nurses, and also in the maternity hospital. And all evaluations were scheduled in primary healthcare centers of the city. The communication strategies with the participant used multi-channel contact methods for individual communication in scheduling evaluations that were combined for the parents, mostly the mothers, and the child. We had a very highly trained research assistant team here for telephone calls from São Paulo. We had like this strategy of text message reminders before the evaluations. The WhatsApp use has increased very much in this decade, and the fact that we had always personalized feedbacks on the health status, the nutritional status of children was always very important for us to communicate and to link better and better with these families. Also, in many times, incurring in referrals and additional care with specialists when children presented health concerns. And we also search for like local solutions, I can say, because we have here a very remote area with some contact and address challenges. I'm going to show a little bit more of this. And one of the strategies up to 5 years of age of our children was to perform home visits for confirmation of contact details. And a very important partner of ours was a local post office worker. So here we have some pictures of the evaluations in the health units there in Cruzeiro do Sul, our social media, and well, in different phases, the local post officer worker with us during the pandemic as well. And for the school-aged children, we had to think a little bit more of strategies, of different strategies for follow-up. And then we did this in different levels, in partnering now with the education sector. So first we assessed the Brazilian Ministry of Education, because here in Brazil we have a school census that is performed in a mandatory way yearly. So it's nationwide, and all private and public schools have to report information on their infrastructure, their professors, and their students. And this was very important for us to understand how the identification of students could somehow, I'm sorry, show us if the children there were actually, if children that were included in the baseline of Mina Brazil study, thank you so much, were still in Cruzeiro do Sul, living there. Remembering also that elementary school here in Brazil is a right, and it's mandatory for children as well. And then when we did this, we had information that, okay, so children are possibly there in Cruzeiro do Sul in the schools of the city, or at least like the majority of children. And then we presented this data to state and municipal education secretaries to show our proposal for conducting a new phase of field work, also remembering of previous partnerships that we established there with the local health sector. and also to get more knowledge about the school calendar in Cruzeiro do Sul for planning these evaluations. And finally, the final level of partnership was with each school in Cruzeiro do Sul, their principals and coordinators, to make arrangements for defining dates and periods for the student evaluations there. The data integration with the school census, the Brazilian school census, was very successful. For those children, here I am eliminating, of course, some child deaths that we had over follow-up. So from 1246 children that were included in baseline. Now we had like 7 cases of child death. So our denominator decreased a little bit, and we could find 1229 children enrolled in schools in Brazil. A little bit more than 1,000 of them were still in Cruzeiro do Sul, and almost 900 were in schools in the urban area. This was a very successful strategy. We had to grant, authorization was granted to our team for data access in these controlled environments for sensitive data. And we did like this merge, this information was merged considering date of birth, place of birth, and sex. And then we had a partnership with the local school census department in Cruzeiro do Sul for refining this integration in information for the students. It's also important to say that the census is also a source of secondary data that usually we don't see much in birth cohorts that are more towards like health issues. We have a very broad school characterization, from the infrastructure to the academic training of the teachers, and also several educational outcomes that we can integrate individually for children in our cohort, considering their approvals, retention, and age distortions, considering the grade that they are enrolled. For field work now in 2015, we had a second source of information that were the school lists that were updated for this current school year. We saw a high agreement with the school census, and we could use more like mass communication strategies with parents through WhatsApp groups for each school. So we could talk about our study and the planning of this new phase of field work directly with parents and or guardians in these channels as well. The schools were also essential for us in gathering authorizations before the evaluation dates from parents or guardians of children. So this was very useful in the structuring of our field work. And still, like phone calls and media contacts, so social media contacts, were sustained to talk directly with parents and guardians of children. Here I show you a map of the 33 schools in Cruzeiro do Sul that we visit in June 2015. And the thing of like having a school-based assessment and not inviting children for a specific place where our team would be waiting for them for an evaluation actually posed a little bit of a complexity, because we had to have like 3 different fronts of field work in parallel during our stay there in Cruzeiro do Sul. We could assess children during school time, so we could go into rooms and have children in small groups for anthropometry, body composition, blood pressure exams, sexual maturation, and a brief interview with them. But we also had the schools as a point of reference for parents or guardians for short interviews about factors that children do not have the autonomy yet to respond for themselves. So household and social demographic data, health status of these children, and scheduling also the blood sample collection. And then this was the third front of field work for us, because we had to partner with a local clinical laboratory in Cruzeiro do Sul for collecting fasting blood samples to measure the hemogram, but also lipid profile and glycemic status as well. Some pictures at the schools that we were, where we were doing our work in Cruzeiro do Sul. state schools and also municipal schools, and some of the pictures of the activities with our team. And here are some results on participant retention. So in the left side of this slide, we have like the flow chart of the Mina Brazil birth cohort, starting with 46 participants. And then we had a total follow-up of 987 children that were interviewed either at 1 or 2 year follow-up. In each of these years, the numbers are a little smaller, of course, and the response rate, considering all the difficulties of contact and access of this area, was from 63 to 70%. And these results for the 2 year follow-up were possible because of the diversity of follow-up strategies that we were using. We were very concerned about the retention when we saw also in the pandemic context that at the 5 year follow-up visit, the cohort response rate was of 56%. And then we have a potential bias, selection bias going on there. With the 9 year follow-up, with this partnership with the education sector, we were able to follow up 70% of the eligible children. And then like our follow-up rate, it's now much better if we compare with the 5 year follow-up visit. Just to finish here this presentation with some remarks on challenges and opportunities that we have while conducting a birth cohort study in countryside Amazon, the countryside Amazon region. This is a unique study population that also brings unique research questions to us. The logistics are quite challenging for sure. And then we really had to restrict follow-up to the urban area of the city, where still we have like poor connectivity and also poor addressing systems in the city in terms of locating people. There's a constant phone number or contact change, and there are many challenges in accessing like these families. The higher attrition, as in most of the cohort studies, happens among socioeconomically disadvantaged families. And then like because of this, we can also understand the importance of trying to have a more broad approach to this birth cohort, and this was possible through the schools. Many parents reported to us like how good it was to have the evaluations in the school, also considering the age range of these kids, because now they have a different routine. If we compare like the first years of life, and these parents were working, they were with younger kids as well. So the placing like the evaluations in the school was a very important step towards having more families around also the neighborhood. And schools were closer than the health units to families as well. Well, one very peculiar challenge that we were facing were like several families that were in doubt, considering our contacts, thinking that we were scamming, or like these were like spam calls that are very common in Brazil. So we used phones with local area codes, and we used a lot of WhatsApp to present our research team and to make them understand that, yes, we were the research team that they knew back there when the children were born. Many principals from the schools were also very helpful in this sense, because they were there to attest, yes, they are here in our school. You can trust. And I think like this effort of planning a school-based assessment for a birth cohort study shows that the potential of administrative data and also like the institutional support that proved essential for us to have like this very nice result in terms of participant retention. So thank you very much. Here we have some of the institutions that are partners with our study since the very beginning, with the Federal University of Acre. Without them, we wouldn't do anything in Cruzeiro do Sul. Also Harvard Chan with Professor Marcia Castro, and more recently, the Federal University of Minas Gerais with all the support for this movement that we are doing with the school databases. And also a great thank you to all the families and the great team of graduate and undergraduate students and other researchers that make part of the Mina Brazil study team. And special thanks to Marli. It's very nice to be here like talking about this, but nothing would be possible without you. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I would like to invite our speakers to sit here in the table. We'll have 15 minutes to questions and comment, and we can start. Hands, questions, comments. And here we have one. Can you walk here in front because of the microphone? Thank you. Just repeat, introduce yourself because it's important for us.
Okay, my name is Ana Carolina. I am a PhD candidate here at the University of São Paulo, and I have a question for the professor. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting and definitely kept us awake. It was very nice to hear all you had to say. And we could see clearly that consider cultural context and specific contexts are very, very important when we are building science and scientific evidence in general. And I would like to hear from you, in your opinion, which are the biggest challenges we have been facing to address the gap of cohort studies in the countries or regions that most need right now?
Thanks for the question. So I think the first large cohort study was established soon after World War II in Britain, right, where they took all the births in a week and just then started following them every few years, right? So that was 1940 something, right? Then there was a bunch set up over the years, and back in the 1960s, when the study that I work with in Guatemala was set up, right? That was part of a set of studies set up by the US, funded by the United States Public Health Service at the time, answering questions of child nutrition and development. But for a variety of reasons, the one in Guatemala is the only one that was followed long-term. And it is now the longest running follow-up of a trial or even a cohort in a low and middle income country. So there is no database, right? In the high income countries, you have studies going back to the 1940s, and you have lots of them, and a lot of studies started in the 1970s and the 1980s and so on, but there's nothing to harmonize. Right, so when cohorts was set up, they found 5 cohorts that had at least reached adolescence. If they wanted to say had at least reached adulthood, then there would only have been 4. And they wanted to include the South Africa one because the South Africa one had a lot of useful information in it. So they said adolescence, because at the time that cohort was 15 years old. Right, so, you know, we're humans. And we age at 1 year per year. So if you start a cohort now, your doctoral students will find it interesting, right? That's the limitation we have, is the lack of a database to harmonize. So, you know, the more studies like the one in, like MENA and like all the other ones we've been hearing about, the amazing work being done in Pelotas, where they're about to start cohort 5, right? You know, which will provide now 40 years of studies, right? This is pretty amazing stuff, you know, and these sort of things need to be funded. They need to persist, right? They need funding from wherever anybody can get funding to keep them going, because they are resources that, you know, a cohort gets interesting, not in the first 2 years, not in the first 5 years, right? But when you can study outcomes.
More questions? We have time. Please, Professor Matthew. Don't worry, don't worry. Everything okay?
Matt Gilman, US NIH. Barbara, I had a specific question for you. So thanks for presenting your really interesting study. And you mentioned in your conclusion slide that, like most cohort studies, the people who were lost to follow-up were of lower socioeconomic status. At the same time, I noticed that most of your lost to follow-up is people who moved out of the city, maybe out of the region. Were they the people of low socioeconomic status, or are they higher socioeconomic status?
Mhm.
Is this a counter to the usual observation?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Very good one. Well, I'm curious about this for the 9-year follow-up. As we did like this field work now in June 2015, I can say that the lower socioeconomic families were were more prone to losses of to follow up in the previous waves of the MENA Brazil cohort. Now we need to understand this better, because we had like this 70% retention of our cohort. We had a lower level of refusals as well by doing this assessment in the schools, at the schools. There were only like 10 cases. There were like 13 transfers, school transfers, that we could not locate the children after leaving schools where they were enrolled in the beginning of this year, and 30 kids that missed school in the day that we were in that specific school and that we could not reschedule. So we tried many approaches during field work to retain children that we knew that were in Cruzeiro do Sul. There are like 300 kids that are outside, but we know that they are in the school census basis. So we are going to be able to compare them considering baseline data, but we do not have this information now, because these are preliminary results in terms of the study population characterization. But I don't know, perhaps they are outside Cruzeiro do Sul because they have like better socioeconomic conditions. But let's say, I don't know, they can be everywhere in Brazil, here in São Paulo, in other states. So we are going to find this out.
One of the reasons I ask is that I think this was in 2011 when there was a paper published from Pelotas that demonstrated no relationship between having been breastfed and obesity.
Mhm.
Unlike most of the studies in higher socioeconomic climates. And so the reason that occurred in Pelotas was that obesity was socially patterned, but in the opposite direction of what it was in other cohorts. And so that was a really nice way of looking for confounding, because the confounding structure was different in Pelotas than it was in other cohorts. Now maybe the selection factors are different in this cohort than in other cohorts. And maybe we can use that to look for, evidence of overcoming selection bias.
Great. We have a time to just one question.
The mini Brazil study is so detailed, fantastic, well done. It is quite a remarkable achievement. My question to you is really, given they're still quite young, what is the biggest question you can ask of that cohort going forward in terms of early exposures, or indeed influences on childhood development and education? I mean, obviously what comes to mind is climate change and so on, but What are you thinking of that you will, what are the biggest question you're going to ask of that cohort going forward?
Okay, thank you for the question. I must say that I agree with Ari here that cohorts get more and more interesting as long as you can follow up the participants. So I have we can have many questions. Here in the current grant that we have like two main axes of research questions. One is dedicated to nutrition, let's say growth and nutrition, and the other one to behavior problems and these social interaction patterns that we are going to understand more from the screening for neurodevelopmental problems that we have in the first years of life. And regarding nutrition trajectories, we are very interested to see if there are multiple trajectories in the cohort. Also because of the nutrition transition stage that we have there in Cruzeiro do Sul that is different from the average in Brazil. In terms of the double burden of malnutrition that we presented some findings already in this morning, but also because and making a link with this question of the socioeconomic status of the families, because it's not like we see in the capitals of our states that perhaps the most the highly educated families already have factors related to the prevention of chronic disease very well established, so they are leaner, they eat better. We don't see this so clearly in Cruzeiro do Sul. So I think that and Marli we have a very nice collaboration with Professor Alicia Matzjasiewicz, and a very nice comparison is with the 2004 Pelotas birth cohort. So it's kind of like a decade before of the Mina Brazil cohort, and also with the malaria burden, that it's something very different from any other part of Brazil. So I think this combinations of biochemical and growth pattern parameters will be very informative to understand this multiple group trajectories of development in terms of more physical health. And then the other part with the behavioral research questions.
I can just add one sentence to that. I think, again, one of the strengths will be in not even looking so much at differences within your cohort, but comparisons across cohorts and looking for trends across cohorts and looking at cohort as a unit of analysis rather than the individual as a unit of analysis. As you get more cohorts reaching maturity, that's going to be a really, really powerful database.
It's perfect. Thank you so much for the questions. Thank you so much for the talks. And now we will finish the first part of our meeting afternoon. And Marli has a small message for everybody before we finish.
Finish this section, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
section.
We're gonna have a short break now and try to get another photo group, but now with a professional just photo in front of the main entrance of the building, in the other building. So I'm just asking you to go to the main entrance and just have a photo and then come back and go downstairs.
Yes.
So this is our physical activity for the day. So this is to encourage everybody to get up and go over there. And Matt here is going to be herding us.
Just one last announcement. So on our way back to seduce you to come back, there will be some coffee in the same place as we had a coffee, but it's not going to be a very long one. It's going to be a short one. So we kindly ask you to grab your coffee and just put your way back. But it's not permitted to eat here inside of the auditorium. So please keep the food outside. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. So just keeping our physical activity, just one another short notes about our social meeting this evening. So yeah, just for her. We're gonna have a live for her music in the evening. So we are just expecting everybody there. No, just for her and maybe some a little some forró and PB. Yes.
So hello, everyone. Can we start? So now we have our communication session, and I hope everybody is there who is going to present. I would like to call Professor Simone Caram and also Professor Antonio Augusto to join the table. They are going to be the moderators of the session.
So good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the organizers to inviting me to participate in this activity. This is being an amazing symposium, and it's an honor to share this roundtable with Dr. Antonio Augusto, which has a great trajectory. So let's go to the last 5 oral presentations. Just reminder you have 10 minutes to present, and then the audience will be able to ask questions and comments. And after that, Dr. Marli will have some messages to say for you, okay? So keep calm, stay with us, because Canto Madalena is only at 6, okay? Our first presenter is Carmen Ildes Rodrigues Asmus, Childhood Environmental Pollutants Project, PIPAS project. Thank you, Carmen. Come on.
May I? Yes?
Yes,
Okay. Hi. Oi. My name is Carmen Froias. I am professor of environmental health in the Public Health Institute at Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. It's a pleasure to be here. I thank this opportunity to present our project, PIPA, Childhood and Environmental Pollutants Project. These are the other authors, and we declare no conflicts of interest. PIPA is a prospective cohort study from birth to 4 years old. We evaluate the, sorry, I talk a lot today. We evaluate the effects of exposure to environmental pollutants on health and development of children. Our study population is a convenience sample of all babies, born at the maternity hospital of our university during 12 months, from pregnant women aged 16 or older living in the city. We collect health information, social demographic, and biological samples from mothers and newborns. So this is the broad vision of the study. Of course, we collect information about the social determinants of health, but the focus of PIPA is environmental pollutants exposure. To it, people are exposed through food, water, air, home use products like pyrethroids and bisphenols, organochlorine compounds, and during pregnancy and childhood. And we evaluate the effects of these exposures on growth and weight gain, respiratory system, metabolic, hormonal, and immunologic biomarkers, and neurodevelopment on birth and childhood. Between October 2017 and 2018, we did a pilot study. This is the coordinate committee group. We published the protocol of PIPA after this pilot study, and we have published some results from this pilot study. And if you want, you can access these papers in our website. It's totally available. So finally, in July 2021, we began our project. Thor was our first baby, here with 2 years old. And the broad scenario. We enrolled here, we enrolled 900 pregnant women at the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. We collect sample and urine, blood and urine samples. We had 800 births. We also collect almost 800 umbilical cord blood. 800 newborns were eligible to evaluation. And we evaluated these babies at 3rd and 6 months, 1, 2, 3 years. We are now beginning the 4th year of evaluation. Our return rate is until now 69%, and we collect urine samples, breast milk, and blood samples. Okay. A very small profile about our population. Our babies are from all planning cities of the city. The profile of our mother is similar to the profile of other mothers in the maternity hospital, of course, and the same to birth profiles. And some rates are similar to the rates of the city. So our first results about environmental pollutant exposure in the city of Rio, in our maternity hospital. About metals in newborns' umbilical cord blood, the detection rate of arsenic was around 60%, and for lead and mercury, almost 100%. That's why I asked I didn't see here. Okay. Here about mercury exposure in Amazon. And we investigate some social environmental conditions associated with high concentration, meaning concentrations above the median. Okay? And we observe an association with urban zones of residence, pregnancy, tobacco exposure, and fish consumption once a week or more. And we explore a little more about these zones of the city, and we found that these 2 zones, we have the higher built area, building density, and population density compared to the other zones, and, 1 minute, and the lower percentage of green areas when compared to other zones. And you can see this in this map of the city. Here is the north zone, here is the center zone, here, and here the other zones of the city. The green areas and the gray areas. We published this result in this paper, and it is also available in the website. About organochlorine compounds in again, cord blood, prenatal exposure, we had a detection rate of around 16%. The mainly compound was DDE. DDE is a product of DDT, and DDT is a pesticide that is prohibited the use in Brazil since the 17th, I think. I'm not sure exactly. Okay. And some results about outcomes. So when we observe prenatal exposure and growth and weight gain, we found that isolated exposure to high concentrations of lead or mercury associated with birth weight, and combined exposure, mixtures of lead, mercury, and arsenic, a risk of 3 times to babies large for gestational age. 3 minutes, okay. And about neurodevelopment, high exposure associated with 8 times probability of failure in the neurodevelopment test, specifically gross motor domain. We can talk about this after because I don't have time now, of course. Postnatal exposure, I want to show you. This study is with only children who return at 3, 6 months, and 1 year. And of course, with urine collected. About arsenic, we have an increase of concentration from 3 months, 6 months, and during this period, 1 year, not difference for cadmium, but lead an increase of concentration, and mercury, it's interesting. Low concentration increase at 6 months and decrease at 1 year. Our research line is in development, endocrine disruptor pollutants, the effects, plasticizes, specifically bisphenol and PFAS, and alterations during pregnancy and childhood, microplastic exposure in placenta, cord, and maternal blood, maternal milk, DNA methylation, exposures to mixtures of pollutants. And now we are developing a partnership with this University of São Paulo, about good microbiome and pollutant exposure. Of course, we do this because we have financial support from the Ministry of Health and research agencies, state and federal agencies. And we have a lot of partner institutions. Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, the University of State of Rio de Janeiro, the Evandro Chagas Institute, and now the University of São Paulo. This is our research group, including researchers from other institutions, our students, and thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Insightful presentation. Okay, let's go to the second presenter now, which is Natália Teixeira de Oliveira. Association between the occurrence of heat waves and breastfeeding practice throughout the year 2019 among children registered in the Brazilian Food and Nutrition Surveillance System. Preliminary results.
Good afternoon. I'm Natália Oliveira. I'm PhD student in nutrition in Federal University of the Rio de Janeiro. I supervised by Professor Diana Farias. Today, I will be presenting my preliminary results of my thesis, PhD research titled Association between the Occurrence of Heat Waves and Breastfeeding Practice throughout the year 2019 among children registered in the Brazilian Food and Nutrition Surveillance System, SISVA. We don't have a conflict of interest. The exclusive breastfeeding is recommended up to 6 months of age by the World Health Organization. Among these benefits are protection against gastrointestinal and respiratory infections, and promotion of adequate growth and development, and health benefits for mothers. Children under 2 years of age, particularly during the first 6 months of life, are in a period of heat vulnerability. External determinants may affect breastfeeding practice, included the social conditions, maternal care, health-related information, and the environmental circumstances. And in recent years, there has been a documented global rise in both the frequencies and the intensity of heat waves. As reported by The Lancet in 2022, record levels of extreme weather events were reported across the continent, increasing risks to human health and survival. And globally, populations have been facing an increase in heat-related illness and the worsening of food insecurity. The systematic review, the authors observed that high temperatures are associated with early interruption of exclusive breastfeeding, increasing provision of liquids, and changes in infant feeding practice. Therefore, the review concludes that extreme heat constitutes a significant challenge to sustained breastfeeding. In a cohort of per person, humans monitored during a period of intense heat, elevated temperatures, were associated with a decreased frequency of breastfeeding and a lower prevalence of exclusive breastfeeding. Nevertheless, despite these findings, evidences from the Latin American countries, especially Brazil, remained limited. So I may offer the work to investigate the association between the occurrence of heat waves and breastfeeding practices among children under 6 months of age, using data from the Sysvan for the year 2019. So the longitudinal students using data from approximately 3,000 children between 0 and 5 months, totaling approximately 4,000 observations, and the repeat measures per children, ranging from a minimum of 1 to a maximum of 6. And the children registered in the Sysvan in 2019. The Sysvan is an important tool for monitoring the population food and nutrition status, enabling both local and collective diagnosis, and identify risks and the protective factors for population health conditions. The data recorded in Sysvan are collected as the part of the routine primary healthcare activities and were provided in the identified format by the Ministry of Health. And the data from Brazilian municipality from its macro region were analyzed. These cities were selected based on the highest coverage of children resisting Sysvan in each region. About the breastfeeding practice, the food consumption data was based on the Extrury questionnaire and food consumption marks. Is the breastfeeding practice is classified ABF, predominant breastfeeding, mixed breastfeeding, complementary breastfeeding, and absence of breastfeeding. And about heat wave, the meteorological municipality data were obtained from the National Institute of Meteorology, and heat waves were defined was the first daily mean temperature data for 8 municipalities were used. Second, the 40%, the 90% mean temperature for each 6 city was calculated in order to establish a location specifying thresholds identify the hostness day. And the third, days with mean temperatures exceeding to thresholds, we classify as hot days. A heat wave was defined as the occurrence of 3 or more consecutive hot days. And the statistical analysis, we describe the analysis, including the frequencies, with 95% confidence intervals, and a multinomial logistic regression model was used with cluster robust standard errors, and that the individual level independent variables included child age in months, municipality, and the heat wave exposure. Among the 5 municipalities, the 70.5% Palmas, 40% Fortaleza, 47.7% Montes Claros, 2.4% Campo Grande, and 18.4% Porto Alegre. Regret age to 23.6% 0 to 1 month old, and 39.7% were 2 or 3 months, and 36.6% for 6 months. Okay. The figure 1 shows the frequency of breastfeeding products in relation to heat waves by municipality. In the relation to beat waves, now in the illustrated heat during heat waves, exclusive breastfeedings declines much more rapidly, while in the periods without extreme heat, exclusive breastfeedings is maintained for several months. During heat waves, we observed winning the introduction of other liquids in the first months. This suggests that these high temperatures may be an important risk factors cessation the breastfeeding. And the table 1, this association between heat wave exposed and breastfeeding products and regular heat wave exposed, we did not find statistically significant association with predominant, mixed, and complementary breastfeeding. However, for children who were not being breastfeeding, heat wave exposure was associated with a slight reduction in the odds begin in the category. Based on the results, we can conclude that exposure or heat waves was associated with a lower likelihood of absences from breastfeeding, and this is breastfeeding differ from those reported in literature. One possible explanation may be the students at science. Most the existing research was concluded in the Africa continent and the Middle West. Therefore, our results highlight the need for the students to better understand these relationships. Are there references used in the mais presentation? And thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Next presenter is Rafaela Vitória Sá, Prenatal Conditions as Predictors of Asthma and Allergy Traits at 2 years of age, a machine learning approach from the BRISA cohort.
Good afternoon. My name is Rafaela Sá, and I'm a first-year PhD student at Federal University of Maranhão, advised by Professor Cecília Ribeiro. And today I'll be presenting you some preliminary findings from my doctoral thesis titled Prenatal Conditions as Predictors of Asthma and Allergy Traits at 2 years of age, a machine learning approach from BRISA cohort. So to begin, asthma and allergies are interconnected conditions, and they affect a significant number of child worldwide, especially during early childhood. These diseases are not only highly prevalent, but they also have a profound impact on quality of life for both the children and their families. So understanding these factors that contribute to the development of asthma and allergies in the first year of life is essential for designing effective prevention strategies, and that's exactly where this research begins. So one of the most effective ways of reduce the risk of asthma and allergies in children is by optimizing woman's health before and during pregnancy. Since maternal factors, as we've seen before, like nutritional, stress levels, and exposure environmental risks play a crucial role in shaping child's immune system. So therefore, previously, our research group that studies maternal and child conditions on early development of non-communicable disease have been exploring these themes of allergy and asthma in early childhood, as you can see here, but using structural equation modeling. And although structural equation modeling is an excellent tool to evaluate theoretical models, we find it limiting to do prediction evaluations. So therefore, this study utilizes these previous findings from structural equation models to apply another type of analytical technique. So our aim here is to apply supervised machine learning techniques to early life data from the BRISA cohort in order to identify prenatal variables associated with asthma and allergy traits at age of 2, and also to create models to predict these conditions. So to do this study, we used data from BRISA prenatal cohort from the city of São Luís, which is the capital of Maranhão state in the northeast of Brazil, using data from 1,447 mother and child diets evaluated during pregnancy, at birth, and at the second year of life. Our outcome, asthma traits, were defined as the presence of either a medical diagnosis at the age of 2 or wheezing episodes. Our second outcome, allergic traits, was defined as the presence of any atopic disease, such as rhinitis, dermatitis, food allergies, or eosinophilia in the second year of life. So to apply the machine learning techniques, we used sociodemographic and economic characteristics during the pregnancy period and before the pregnancy, maternal behavioral factors, maternal health conditions, and a child-related variable. The analytical statistics was made by using machine learning, which is an artificial intelligence technique. So we did this using the full data set and then applying a cross-validation technique and multiple algorithms, such as random forest, support vector machine, and others. So we divided this data in training and test data. We did pre-processing in the cross-validation as imputation, exclusion of near zero variance, centering and scaling variables, training the model with multiple algorithms, and then we do the performance estimate using sensitivity, specificity, accuracy, precision recall, etc. So allergy traits in our data set was found to be in 53.5% of the children. Both of our models were using support vector machine algorithm, and the accuracy for allergy traits was 55.3%, the sensitivity was 50.9%, and the specificity was 60.4%. For asthma traits, 30.6% of our child presented asthma traits, and the accuracy of the model was 58.6%, sensitivity of 51.8%, and specificity of 61.8%. So machine learning models are often described as black boxes, because people say when you apply an algorithm, you don't really know how they calculate and interact the variables, the attributes with the outcome. However, in recent years, some techniques have been developed. One of them is SHAP values, SHAP explanations values, and they show how these attributes on the model interact with outcome. So here we're bringing the future importance for both allergy and asthma traits. In red, I highlighted the conditions that are similar for both models. I'm sorry, this is in Portuguese. The variables are in Portuguese, but we're gonna see it in English. So we have here the yellow values means the presence of these conditions, while the purple color means the absence of these conditions. So we see here the family history, which is the first one in allergy traits, is the most important conditions for this model, and the presence of family history of any atopic or atopic or respiratory disease is the most contributor to the model. We also see low-income families in both models, the presence of hypertension during pregnancy in both models as well, and weekly consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. And from child-related variable, we have the early introduction of food, which means the interruption of exclusive breastfeeding. So we conclude that early life exposures, often modifiable and socially driven, may be associated with the development of asthma and allergies by age of 2. We believe these findings have, these preliminary results have important public health implications. They highlight the need for upstream policies that support maternal health in a holistic way, integrating nutrition, prenatal care, and socioeconomic support. And rather than isolate interventions, we need coordinate strategies that address broader determinants of health. This means empowering women and improving access to care and creating environments that promote health pregnancies and health children. So looking ahead, our goal for the next months and years are to translate these findings into practical tools that can support clinical decision-making and public health planning. So we are currently working on the development of predictive technology, which is a risk calculator that uses prenatal data to estimate the likelihood of asthma allergy traits by age of 2, but also other non-communicable disease. So this tool, we believe that could help healthcare professionals to identify high-risk cases early and guide them to actions tailored to each mother and child, using also an evidence-based communication using large language models in primary care, which are also in the development. So we believe that by bridging research and real-world application, we hope to contribute to a more proactive and personalized approach to maternal and child health. This work was supported by the Brazilian Ministry of Health, CNPq, in partnership with Gates Foundation, and our authors declare that they have no conflict of interest. 3 seconds to the references. And this is the team that is developing this incredible work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rafaela. Very nice presentation. The fourth communication is tissue-specific expression-based polygenic risk scores and methylation score in interaction with birth weight associated to childhood BMI, a multi-cohort study. The presenter is Fernanda Lima Soares.
Good afternoon. My name is Fernanda Lima Soares. I'm from the Federal University of Maranhão, the Department of Physical Education. And this is the work that is from my PhD. I recently finished. And this work was part of my training in McGill University in Canada, in the lab of Professor Patrícia Silveira, and with the supervisor of Antonio Marcos Pais, that is here today. We declare no conflicts of interest. And today I will present you our hypothesis that functional genomics can help us understand how the birth weight can related to late BMI. So we know that poor fetal growth is very known and studied risk factor and can be measured by birth weight. However, when we study birth weight and low birth weight specifically, not all the kids that have been born low birth weight develops the disease after in life. So we know that we have some risk of neurometabolic disorders, eating disorders, obesity late in life, but we have some kids that is not affected by these risks. And our hypothesis is that genetics and epigenetics may moderate these distinct effects that will differentiate which kids will have and develop this disease and which kids will be somehow protected, even they have been born birth weight, low birth weight. Here we have our aim is to investigate if the nuclear accumbens in visceral adipose tissue expression-based polygenic risk score, that is a score developed and validated by Professor Patricia Silveira's lab, if this moderate the association between birth weight and BMI in 3 different cohorts, and if adding methylation score, that is another score of functional genomics already very published, if this contributes to the models. So it's a work of individually and trying to understand which subjects are really at risk, even a lot of them have been born low birth weight. To have a little bit of context in why we have decided to use nuclear accumbens and visceral adipose tissue, we have this objective to have a central and one peripheral tissue. The nuclear accumbens, we know that is central in the reward and motivation center, had an hedonic eating behavior really connected, and has a key role in the dopaminergic modulation. The other hand, the white adipose tissue, we know is the lipid storage and have a metabolism role, endocrine signaling in our system. And in the early adipose dynamics is very important, especially the white adipose tissue. Here we have a little bit of information about the 3 cohorts that we used. We use MAVEN, that is a cohort from Canada, collected in Montreal. We have Gusto, it's a Singaporean cohort, and the data of Bible, that is made in Dutch population. So we have the number of participations, and we have also the time that we have the BMI to correlate and try to understand this associate with the birth weight. Here we have how we built the EPRS. I will try to explain in the rapid form, but if you want, I can explain better later. So we first understand and select this article from Du and colleagues. It's an article published with an EWOS that could predict the BMI in adults. So we use this data, and the genes and SNPs, they published it to identify the genes and locate these genes in our kids from our 3 cohorts. When we select and identify these genes, we put this tissue-specific information in the GTEx. GTEx is the database that will present all the expression that we imagine that will happen in the specific tissue. So we create one score with individual nuclear accumbens and individual white adipose tissue, actually 2 scores, one for each tissue, were computed by weighting each participant's genotypes with GTEx effects for US, that the EWOS from this article made with genes. So it's a little bit complex, but really functional method that Professor Patricia Silveira developed. And then we use also a methylation score. It's a functional genomics approach that's a little bit older, but is still very useful. In the methylation score, we use the same list of genes that we get from that article I showed you, and we made we sum this with the methylation levels in the cohorts. So all our kids in the 3 cohorts, we have genotype information and also methylation levels information from these kids. Here, just to simplify what I have explained, we have the article that I got the gene list and the CPGs. We create an EPRS for each of the the tissues, and I create the methylation score. These scores are created for each one of the kids from the 3 cohorts. And then we create an associations and interactions models with all these kids, with all the scores of the 3 cohorts in the same association model. So in the results, the first model I will show you is the EPRS from nuclear accumbens interaction with birth weight to predict BMI. What we found that it's in MAVEN, the Canadian cohort, the brain reward-related genetic function modulates how birth weight influences BMI. So the nuclear accumbens, especially for these kids with low EPRS scores for nuclear accumbens, they have a big relationship between the birth they were born and the BMI they will have at 6 years old. In Gusto and in Bible, this was not found. When we analyzed the EPRS from white adipose tissue interacting with birth weight to predict BMI, in Gusto, we have the adipose tissue function played a key role in shaping initial BMI trajectories, but in MAVEN and in Bible, this was not found. In Bible, actually, we did not observe any significant interaction in both scores and tissues. This is interesting because we can see that in different populations with very different backgrounds, we can see that this is really important to understand which pathway will guide this interaction between birth weight and BMI. Adding the methylation score did not change our results. Even for better or for worse, we don't have any difference when adding methylation score in the models. So to conclude, we have some implications that identify the vulnerable subgroups early for target prevention strategies may be possible with functional genomics, but we have some limitations as the modest sample size, the different ages that the kids are collected the methylation data in the 3 cohorts, and the GTEx ancestry structures. So the GTEx is a database that uses the information of expression, tissue-specific expression, but in adults. We don't have a base with expression in kids, and we know that the time of life, the period of life can change this pattern of methylation. And the tissue-specific PRS can flag which pathway is most relevant for precision prevention, informing early interventional strategies. The interaction between tissue-specific score and birth weight may vary across different populations. And this was like we found more interesting, this difference between different populations. And now we are testing in ABCD. It's a cohort for North American people. And we're seeing again different pathways from each cohort and population. So this study was founded by CNPq and CAPS. I have to thank you, especially Professor Patricia Silveira from McGill University to help me understand a little bit of these functional genomic words. And here I have the reference, and thank you all for the attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Fernanda. And now the last oral communication is mapping health risks in the first 1,000 days. Complex networks of maternal factors, birth outcomes, and non-communicable disease in childhood by Silas Alves.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Silas. I am postdoc at Federal University of Maranhão, and then I'm going to present a part of my thesis entitled Mapping Health Risks in the First 1,000 Days, Complex Network of Maternal Factors, Birth Outcomes, and Non-Communicable Disease in Early Childhood, supervised by Prof. Cecilia. The first 1,000 days of life, of course, you know, is that the critical window and opportunity, and we have an opportunity to intervene in the course of non-communicable disease long term. So our research group have been dedicated to understand some of these challenges in this critical period, and then working on some works that you already know that Rafaela Brilliant presented before me. However, most of this analysis was relied on linear models or pairwise regressions, and then so we tried to find some understanding or a analytical tool to understanding this complex and these interactions that would in fact are very, very complex interactions. For example, using these analytical tools called complex networks. These complex networks has already been applied in other fields, for example, to understand the interactions in global network airport and between interactions in some proteins and interactions in bacteria communities. And we already applied this technique to understand the interrelationship between non-communicable disease in age groups in the US population. Interestingly here, this head point is Caries, which is a central hub in these networks across life decades. We also applied a complex network to analyze BRISA RPS cohort consortium conducted in São Luís. We analyzed many factors, and now we included some behavioral, socioeconomic factors and some chronic conditions, and we found that the hub in this network was the exposure of free sugar in the adolescents. And it was followed by TYG index and low socioeconomic class of adolescents. So in this study, we took a step back and set out the interrelationship in the chronic conditions in the first 1,000 days of life. So we decoded the complex network for prenatal, pre-gestational period, gestational period, adverse birth outcomes, and the early onset of non-communicable disease in childhood. So we used data from BRISA prenatal cohort conducted in São Luís, the capital of a state in northwest of Brazil. We analyzed data for a sample of 1,383 pairs of mother and child, and the baseline was when the pregnant was between the 22 to 25 weeks of gestation, and this first follow-up was conducted at birth, and the second follow-up was conducted when the children was 2 years of age. We consider many factors from mothers. We analyzed data regarding before pregnancy, like hypertension, diabetes, and so on. And we analyzed some factors in the during pregnancy, for example, some factors related to socioeconomic field, and some behaviorals, for example, smoking, alcohol use, and some diet habits like the weekly consumption of ultra-processed foods and weekly consumption of sugary drinks, and some non-communicable disease during pregnancy like hypertension, diabetes, anemia, and caries and periodontitis. Periodontitis is a gingival disease. And from the child, we analyzed at birth, we analyzed some adverse outcomes the cesarean section, preterm birth, and macrosomia. And at 2 years of age, we consider the consumption, the early exposure of added sugars, and some breastfeeding factors, and some that we consider the first non-communicable disease in the childhood, which is some overweight and obesity, the signs of asthma and allergy, and dental caries. So we addressed the missing data using multiple imputation, and we analyzed these many factors, the interactions of these many factors, using complex network analysis. So just to clarify here, the nodes and the size of nodes represent the maternal and child conditions. The size of node represent the centrality, or how this condition is important in the network, and the connections between these sizes is the edges, and we weighted these edges using DOHaD index. DOHaD index it's a measure, and it's a measure that we can see how to condition co-core. So we analyzed many centrality measures, and we analyzed the communities in these interactions using Lovan algorithm. So here is some results of this study. This is the overall interactions between these factors. As you can see here in the center of this complex network, we can see ultra-processed food consumption during pregnancy and sugary drinks, the consumption of sugary drinks during pregnancy, in socioeconomic status. This is confirmed when we analyzed the closeness and the egging values, which is some other centrality measures of the centrality factors in the complex network. This is the community detected by the Lovan algorithm. We found 3 communities: this central community in yellow, and 2 adjacent communities. And these communities are linked by a bridge, in this case, hypertension and unskilled labor of head of the family. When we can see, when we want to see the specifics outcomes, we can analyze this kind of complex network called STAR. So here, the thickness of the edges is the strong connections. So we can see here the cesarean sections, macrosomia and preterm birth. It's kind of identical when we see that ultra-processed foods, sugary drinks, and socioeconomic factors is the main edges in these complex networks. And when we see the chronic conditions in second year of life, we see allergy and obesity is very identical: sugary drinks, ultra-processed food, and low socioeconomic status of the pregnant. And some here we highlight some non-communicable disease during pregnancy, like anemia, caries, and periodontitis as main factors as well. Here is same for asthma and caries. So we conclude that socioeconomic factors, behavioral risk, and oral and systemic health during pregnancy strongly influence adverse birth outcomes and the onset of non-communicable disease in childhood, having as central hubs consumption of sugary drinks and ultra-processed foods, socioeconomic disadvantage, and maternal non-communicable disease. So I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, and also take this opportunity to invite you to know our digital material that we introduce DOHaD theory in the industry. It's not so common to talk about DOHaD in the industry. So for us, it's a very pleasure to be someone of the primers in this field. Thank you so much. And thank you for my team. Thank you for Brisa. And thank you all of you.
So now we invite all the presenters to come here to questions and comments, please.
I have a question for Fernanda. Why haven't you combined the 3 cohorts?
Like in the same model? So we tried to do this, but these results were a little bit, how can I say it? Like they had some aleatorism. We couldn't find a pattern, but we're still working and analyzing this data.
Hello, everybody. First, I would like to congratulations for all presenters. And my question is for Rafaela. I would like to know why don't you use new algorithms such as LightGBM, CatBoost, and you prefer to use support vector machine that new research can show that a new algorithms can give good metrics and performance. Even you can see that recently was developed a new algorithms that can perform it very good for tabular data, even when you use problem of classification or problem of regression. So I don't understand why you show support vector machine.
Thank you for your question. I think the answer to this question is because I didn't mention in the presentation, but I'm an R software user. And these algorithms that you cited, they are mainly in Python. So I do all the parts of the analytical part, from descriptive or data manipulating and constructing the models in R. And I'm using Cohort package to build the models. And we have some restrictions. LightGBM is not available in the Cohort package to build the model, but I've been trying to learn Python so I can apply these algorithms, because what I've been reading, they function better in tabular data, like GBM, CatBoost, LightGBM. I'd use it also AdaBoost. I use it also, but we're still working on the models, and these were preliminary results that we've managed to get a better performance estimates with support vector machine and also logistic regressions and random forest and AdaBoost. But I think it's a software question, a software thing, and the package I'm using our software. With Python, I think I could test these algorithms as well, but I'm not really well versed in Python yet. I haven't changed it. I haven't learned everything with machine learning in Python, but I'm the pathway. Thank you for your question.
Hi, I have a question regarding the course, wonderful study. And my question is regarding the hygiene hypothesis. Did you check for the if there is any influence of having, cattle, in the neighborhood, as is the case, for example, for the Amish people compared to the Hutterites, domestic cattle?
Having animals in the house.
Yeah, not animals too, but especially cattle. Gado.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for translating.
No problem.
We have this variable in the questionnaire, but we do not have, because we're trying to do prediction using gestation, pregnancy variables majorly, we do not have this question in the pregnancy, during the pregnancy period. We only have at 2 years of age, which is very close to the outcome. And using it in the model would be good practice because it's too close to what we are aiming to predict. So we're trying to do early intervention, and we do not have this variable during pregnancy, I think. So that's why we did not include it in the model.
It would be interesting.
May I do a question for her? Yes, about this and about chemical substance, because there are a lot of papers relation.
Yes, when I was watching your lecture, I was reminded that we do have a part of the questionnaire about exposure during the pregnancy period. However, we did not include it in the model, but as I was watching your lecture, I was thinking maybe the exposure I confess that I have not deepened about the question present, but I do know we have a part in there, so I don't know. It's a possibility for sure.
And just to complement Rafaela's answer, Brisa cohort is only an urban cohort.
Congratulations to everyone for the brilliant presentations. I feel so proud of these wonderful Brazilians. And sorry for bombarding with questions, Rafaela. It's just a personal question that I keep asking myself in my analysis as well. So why did you decide in using timing of food introduction instead of exclusive breastfeeding, and how to handle those two things that are kind of related, but they are not exactly the same thing? Yeah.
Thank you for your question. So we were testing, we had more child variables in our model. We had disease scores during birth. We had also breastfeeding. We had early introduction of food. And what we realized after reading a little bit more about the methodology is that we don't include highly correlated variables as predictors because we are repeating the measure. So when we added breastfeeding, I think we added the 4 months and the 12 months. We did the test. We got better accuracy and sensitivity also. But we were focusing on gestational variables, and the model kind of selected early introduction. And we did not want it to add breastfeeding because we believe if you stop to exclusive breastfeeding is because you did an early introduction of food. So before the time. So why early introduction, not breastfeeding? I don't know. I think they could be. I did not test it like excluding early introduction and adding breastfeeding because our variable is from. I think we added the 12-month, not exclusive, but breastfeeding, and we're trying to like the intervention early as possible, and early introduction is before 6 months in the child. So that's why we added it and not the breastfeeding variable that we have.
I have a question to Carmen. Yes. We talk a little bit at coffee, but I would like to know if you have collected some variable concerning congenital anomalies or not. and if you intend to expand the project for other centers.
Yes, it's about congenital anomalies, malformations. We have collected, but actually we have a small population to have some expressive information about this because it's only our maternity hospital. But we would like to have other partners, institutions, doing maybe the same design of studying other maternities possible. It's not complicated to collect cord blood, and it's excellent sample to show prenatal exposure. It's third trimester, but it's very interesting. It's possible. It's easier than collect blood from children with 2 years old, and you know. So yes, we have talked with the Minister of Health about this. One day maybe we can do some kind of, maybe with people here, it's possible we talk.
We have time for more questions.
Hello, Bianca from Federal University of São Paulo. Congratulations for all the presentations. Very interesting, very well analyzed, designed, and presented. So my question is for Carmen. I'd like to know if you considered pregestational BMI for the association of metal exposure and large for gestational age and birth weight, or if you think there is some kind of interaction between metal exposure and BMI.
Yes, we adjust to when we collect data when we enrolled the pregnant women. Many things I couldn't talk because there was a time, and so. But yes, when we collect information about the pregnant women in the third trimester, we apply the questionnaire and we evaluate some index like this. And yes, we adjust the results for these variables. And also, we are expecting the results of metals in the maternal blood because you also collect. We have the hypothesis because many of these pollutants, they have toxic action as endocrine disruptors. There are a lot of scientific evidence about this in laboratory studies, a lot of cohorts outside of our country that investigate this, and there is many information about this. And in our hypothesis is this environmental exposure, usually common environmental exposure that we have in our cities, in our day-by-day, they can have some kind of contribution action, maybe in some of outcomes that we are studying, like the obesity and others, and not the principal action, but maybe we aren't investigating this yet, and that is why we don't associate, because in other countries we have, as I said, many evidence, mainly with compounds like some metals, lead, and others, organochlorine compounds. They have this kind of action as endocrine disruptors since the prenatal exposure and during the childhood. And so, yes, we are considering, and we are trying to search this the best that we can.
So thank you very much. Unfortunately, you had to finish, and it was a great section. Congratulations for all of you. It was amazing work.